This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast, and obviously no club matches this weekend in the leagues due to the Calcutta Cup match at Murrayfield, but plenty of rugby to look back on from last Saturday, and Dale Clancy is with me as usual to take a look at them. We'll also be ploughing our way through the comments from people concerning the ending of Super Series and what they think is going to happen, and it's been so interesting to read the variety of thoughts and the divisiveness of the whole thing. One thing is crystal clear: whatever is decided, there's going to be fierce opposition against any plan. So this is not going to be an easy thing to sort out at all. We're also going to be joined by Neil Hinnigan, Director of Rugby at Kelso, for his thoughts. He's obviously a member of the rugby radio team as well. So that's coming up very, very shortly. But let's start in the Premiership, and the big meaningful game happened on Friday night. Curry facing Mar, with the winner grabbing a home semi-final to play each other again on March the 2nd. It ended 27 points to 17 to Mar, who have completed the double over Curry this season, and it was Curry's fifth defeat of the season, but their first at home. What about that, Dale?
Yeah, a huge result for Mar in the end to get that home advantage going into the semi-final, and you know there's obviously a bit of confidence in there as well to do the double on Curry. But you know, I spoke about it week after week. It's now knockout rugby. You know, it's cup rugby for them, and you know I'm sure Curry will be going to Fuller in with the incentive of just making sure that they can put in a performance to get a chance in the final. So, you know, obviously I was watching little bits of the footage that was streamed online as well. It was, again, a big physical battle between the two sides, who are both really, you know, in terms of the weaponry that they have in their squad, they're really, really physical. But Mar just able to nudge it in the end and get a valuable victory.
Curry were 10-0 up in that game. A few weeks before, they were 18-0 up or 17-0 up against Kelso. So in the last couple of matches, they've started really well, but it's the finishing they're not getting any results from at the moment.
Yeah, and that'll play in their mind going into the game against Mar in a few weeks' time. Is there'll be nerves there, and that can go both ways. You know, that could seep into their performance, and they might get a little bit too anxious, and Mar might have a bit of a cakewalk to the final. But you know, the other side of that is they've got a lot of time to prepare and get ready for that game, and the coaches will have that in mind. You know, they'll be analysing the last few performances anyway to see how they can approach this game against Mar, and that's the beauty of it. Now, both teams have a long lead into this game. It'll give them a lot of time to analyse, sit down and really reflect on where they've won and lost games against each other. So obviously Mar going into this with the upper hand, home advantage, 2 wins in the bag. But you know, Curry then they're underdogs, and I think that's a dangerous position for them to be in. So
the semi-finals are going to be taking place March the 2nd. The other one, obviously, as we know in the Borders, is Hawick against Kelso, first against fourth in the league there. How's that going to pan out? Because the pressure's totally off Kelso for a start.
Yeah, I think that it's probably a more extreme scenario as opposed to the Mar Curry one. Obviously, Hawick have done the double over Kelso, but I've said week on week the fact that Kelso are in that conversation and managed to get in the fourth place is one of the stories of the season. The culture that they've got at that club now is remarkable. I've been able to follow them for about a decade, played against them before, you know, and there's times where that club's probably not been at times the club's gone through some difficult challenges. The brand of rugby's not always been the best, but over the last few years they've really excelled themselves and got themselves into a chance, knockout rugby, to upset the odds against Hawick. Now, Hawick obviously started as favourites, but Kelso, you know, they'll want to give a good account of themselves and make it a good challenging battle.
Well, if only we had someone from Kelso with... Oh, look, there's Neil Hinnigan over there. We'll bring you in a bit earlier because obviously you have a vested interest in this particular question. So it's Kelso, who of course did incredibly well against Mar to beat them, and also against Hawick. You were desperately unlucky not to get anything out of that one.
You know, that's probably one of the games that we didn't get any points and probably deserved something. I think on the day Hawick still probably deserved to edge it, but I think, you know, looking back, the day we got beat 61-7 at Mansfield, you'd have been a brave man to say we'd be back there to play in the playoff. So
what changed then? Because I mean, obviously you're up here for the first time in 20 odd years into the Premiership. You were facing the mighty Hawick, the mighty Mar, and the mighty Curry on their own patches in the first part of the season, and a little bit rabbit in the headlights, no doubt. But then, of course, things totally changed, and you turned over Curry, you turned over Mar, you got very close to Hawick, 8 points. You were 1 try away from a try bonus, and 1 point away from a losing bonus.
Yeah, there was definitely a turning point. The turning point was, I think there was a fair bit of pressure on us. Everyone was talking about, you come straight back down, and that was the fear. That was at the back of our minds, fear. And I think because of the situation Jed were in, we played them, and we targeted that game. That we knew if we won that at home, it was more than likely that was probably going to be enough at that point to really take a lot of pressure off. And we did lose heavily to Hawick, and we weren't great away to Mar, but the Curry game was one that we tactically fielded, apart from really Bruce McNeil, a second string pack, and to our surprise it was like 10-6 at half time, something like that, and we missed a really good opportunity to take the lead up there right before half time, and then we had a crazy little spell in the game, and then we got the same outcome on the results sheet of what we'd had to the Hawick and Mar. So what happened then was we realised that the 3 games after that was Jed, Musselburgh and Heriots, and we really, really targeted those 3 games. We really felt we could win all 3. We weren't great against Jed at home. It was typical border derby stuff. It wasn't a great game, but after that, Musselburgh beat Mar away the same day, and they were, everyone was talking about Musselburgh, sort of in the similar way they are about us now. And we felt that was a huge challenge for us, and if we could, all of a sudden the shackles were off because we beat Jed, we'd done what people minimally expected of us. And I think the mental side of that, we got a great start against Musselburgh, and to be honest with you, we never really looked back since.
That was the turning point.
Yeah,
really?
Definitely. And I think confidence is a huge thing, and over the summer we didn't recruit heavily because we felt like, we had to back ourselves on our knowledge that we felt the bottom 3, 4, 5 teams in the Premiership, I didn't feel were any better than ourselves in Ayr at the time, and I thought, we could probably do something with what we had, and the players that got us there deserved that opportunity. We felt we could build a bigger spirit and a bigger togetherness in that league. And it's easy sitting here now saying it, that we knew what we were doing. There was times where we were like, it was a mystery to us as well. We were like, we've got to back what we believe, and thankfully it came right. There's many reasons why it might not have, and we're having a different conversation, but this is the principles we stuck to from day one, and we've stuck with it, and we had some hard times, and then obviously we've gotten quite a lot of reward from it. So we've had a bits of luck as well in the way, but yeah, there was a changing point in the season, and that was against Musselburgh at home. And as I say, apart from last Saturday, we'd only lost, I think, 1 in 9 or something. That was to Hawick. So the form's there. We've certainly deserved to be in 4th place, or I think everyone agrees, but that was the turning point, definitely.
So last weekend there were just 2 dead rubbers, really, let's call them what they are. Heriots Blues against Selkirk, 33 points to 10 in that game, and Kelso just being picked out. It was one of those ding-dong battles, and it was a game of penalties, really, wasn't it, where the lead was changing hands all the time, and in the end Glasgow Hawks got that victory, 17 points to 15. No real damage done, but how did that affect the boys? Because still going into your next match, which will be against Hawick, obviously, you always like to keep that winning streak going, and that was a defeat.
Yeah, at the end of the day it was a defeat, and a lot of people probably expected us just to go to Hawks in routine and get a win, and Hawks had a great win against Heriots the outing before, and that done us a massive favour. I feel, without being disrespectful to Hawks, I think if the pressure had been on us and we really had to win, I think we could have. But on the day, Hawks totally deserved to win. They fronted up. Their physicality in the front 5 was immense. I've not seen Terry Logan, Bruce McNeil. They were getting knocked back on the gain line in that collision, and it was big, and we actually took a couple of players off just through the fear for injuries. So we wanted to get out of there with no injuries, but I must admit, I think Hawks really probably deserved the win on the day, but we could have won it at any point. We butchered a lot of chances. We got beat in the scrums early doors. Had quite a young front row out for a change, and it didn't work really as such. But it was a bottomless pit on the day. It was that much rain. It was just a forward battle, and normally we would fancy ourselves in a forward battle. However, the first 10 minutes, I was a little bit disappointed in our attitude. We kind of sort of disrespected Hawks a little bit. I think we thought ourselves it would be routine. We actually took a decision to take a scrum on the 22-metre line in front of the posts on a rainy day, and I'm thinking, sitting in the stands, thinking, knock this over, 3-0 up, momentum's with us, and Hawks actually got a scrum from that penalty, and the lift they got from that, and that was about 10 minutes in. From that point on, it was battle royal till the end. If you'd been there, it wasn't a great spectacle, but it was an exciting one, and it did go ding dong all the way to the finish. So, you know what? Preparing for Hawick, it's probably been a good one, because it was physical and a hard match, and possibly similar conditions to Mansfield.
No disrespect to Hawks, obviously, but for weeks they've been conditioned in playing games that don't really mean a lot in the grand scheme of things. This was Kelso's real first one, but we were chatting about it, the week before, about squad selection, and my opinion was to go full noise. Robbins was different. Stuart, as always, sits on the fence. But we were obviously having a discussion. But what were the chats like within your camp in terms of protecting some players, or the approach to change the mindset? Because I do think the culture at Kelso's magnificent over the last few years. So what were the chats like about the squad?
Yeah, well, that it was a big topic, and because of the timing of the last game against Jed, we would have went a month or 4 weeks without a game. So we felt like this one sat right in the middle, and we said, well, if someone's got a knock, then they won't play. So if everyone's okay, then they play, and we try and go as strong as we could. In the end, we felt like guys like Angus McGregor has been superb. He's 18 years old, loose head prop. We felt like he deserved a chance, so Grant Shields stepped out, which, some players like him have been around the block. They don't need as much experience, Dale, so we want to get these guys experience whenever we can. So some of the changes we made were more on that front, and then we protected a few people. However, we made a mistake. We had Keith Melbourne playing, and we had to bring him off fairly early because his ankle's still not quite right. So again, we didn't get that right, but that's the kind of game it was. We were through there looking at the semi-final, unfortunately, and then having to make decisions there, and accepting that we may get beat off Hawks, but it wasn't, obviously wasn't the end of the world. But the players were hurting, and Bruce was fairly fired up at half time. They got a bit of a rollicking at half time, first time for a long time, and they know they didn't play well. I think some of the senior players they know that, but we felt we had to answer your question back to the point, we felt we had to try and keep some momentum because of the length of time in that situation.
Well, let's have a look at the Premiership table then, as it stands at the moment, almost towards the end of the season. So we've got Hawick, obviously in first place. I almost said champions there, but not quite yet. They need a couple of games to do that. But any normal league, they would be champions. 77 points. Mar, 71. Curry have got 65. Kelso, 53. They've all played all their games now. We've got Heriots Blues in fifth place on 50. Musselburgh, 47. Inbrackey's 46. Selkirk 35, and then one game left to play in the Premiership. That's Glasgow Hawks at Jed Forest, and then that will be done and dusted. At the moment, Glasgow Hawks on 34, Jed Forest relegated on 5, but Glasgow Hawks, they'll look at that game in March the 2nd, I think it is, as well, isn't it? And they'll think, we can jump above Selkirk here, job done.
Yeah, I think they've had a disappointing season overall, and we've spoke week on week in terms of how they've got to reinvent themselves. But if they finish the seasons with 3 wins against 2 teams who were vying for the playoffs, one got in them, and a team who were consigned to the bottom, then that gives them a little bit of confidence ahead of a cup campaign, and then building towards next year as well. But you've got to mention Jed as well, because it's the one opportunity that's left for them to salvage something positive. from their season. So it's been such a disappointing campaign for them. It's, again, not a lot to play for, apart from pride, but obviously I think Hawks, they certainly go into that game favourites, and they'll be wanting to get a little bit of momentum going ahead of the Cup campaign.
Into National 1 then, and there were 3 games in National 1. Dundee 7, GHA 38, Glasgow Accies 31, GHK 12, and Highland 35, Gala 27. Highland and Gala didn't really mean anything apart from pride for Highland, ending on a high there. Dundee getting nothing. Dundee only needed a couple of points, but they also needed GHK not to win, and that's what happened. GHK in the derby at Glasgow Accies, 31-12 it ended up. So if we have a quick look at the table, Ayr champions 74, Highland 56, GHA 56, but GHA can still go above Highland because they have 1 game to go. Glasgow Accies have got 2 games to play. They're on 51, Melrose 51, Watsonians 50, Biggar 40, Gala 39, Dundee 29 and GHK 21, and that is significant because GHK can now not catch Dundee and GHK are relegated.
Yeah, obviously the two teams at the bottom it was a big weekend for them, and Dundee survived because GHK can't pick up any points against Glasgow Accies away from home. So, on paper you'd say they're relegated. I don't know where these Super Series clubs are going to be splatted in the landscape of the league. So, but on in terms of this championship structure, GHK are down, and I think that obviously they made a good fist of it. They've come up the leagues over the last few years, but Dundee have went through a period of transition as well, and it does give them another year to try and make that work, because they've obviously tried to combine everything up in Dundee, and hopefully in time that bears fruit. But yeah, they'll have to fight another day in National 1. And
being totally selfish, the one good thing about all this is that GHA and GHK won't be in the same league next year, because they've caused us all sorts of problems over the year.
Yeah, the royal we, I think, more you than I. But yeah, certainly, it's great to see one of the acronyms drop down a division. Just for professional purposes.
Full programme of National 2 games, or there would have been if Lasswade and Falkirk had been played, but that was the only match off due to a waterlogged pitch. Peebles needed to go to Kirkcaldy to get 5 points to stay on track for promotion. They left it very late indeed, 8 points adrift into injury time, so looking to be going away with nothing. And then a Matty Carrier double in injury time got them over the line, and I don't think I've ever seen you so excited.
Peebles players, Kirkcaldy players etched in mud win the penalty for not rolling away. So there's a chance here. They look to go quickly. Matty Carrier goes. He bundles over the line. Matty Carrier has won it in the death for Peebles. He's gone over the line. He's taken the initiative. He took the quick penalty and just catapults his way through the line. The hooker, who was held up mere moments before, has just won it for Peebles at the death. They've got the bonus point victory, and it is Kirkcaldy 20, Peebles 24 when they kick the cup.
Kirkcaldy took all their chances that they were given. Peebles didn't, but luckily they were able to escape at the end. And we mentioned on air the experience and the intelligence that we get from that they get from Matty Carrier. He subtly asked the question of the referee, is this the mark there? Took it quickly, was quite calm and nonchalant about it, and then got over the line and squeezed under. And he's probably, with the condition of the pitch, he's probably still sliding just now. But it was a great finish to what was an exciting game.
And of course they had the opportunity to go for goal, which was a fairly kickable penalty at the time as well. So he made that decision on his own, and he had to score it.
Yeah, there wasn't another option there. Kicking for the penalty gives them could give them a chance of a win, and in difficult conditions they needed a bonus point. They needed that bonus point win, because there was chat before about the fact that the Falkirk Lasswade game was off. It allows people to focus solely on themselves, but as soon as that whistle went to start the game, the rain came down, and you knew at Beveridge Park it was only going to be one real outcome. It was going to be an arm wrestle up front, and Kirkcaldy have the pack. If you could play the league between probably November and January and have rain and kind of clar on the pitch, Kirkcaldy would be one of the best teams in the division. But in the games where they've been asked to run around a little bit more, teams find them out. But they were impressive, and it was a huge crowd, and it was a great advert for the national game, not just in Premiership and national. Like in terms that was National 2, the stand was full. There was loads of people spectating as well. There was drama at the end, and it didn't matter what side you were supporting. It was a really good advert and a really good game. It's going to come down to points difference, and I think you don't want people loading too much pressure on themselves ahead of that big game on the 16th of March.
And of course Aberdeen need all the points they can get as well, scrapping for their lives that day.
Yeah, they are, but I just think that the people should have far too much class and far too much strength and depth in that squad. If Stuart's Melville can go away from home and rack up a big points tally, there's no reason why Peebles, with the likes of Hodgkiss and Dow, who are playing well in the centres, Davy Collins has got his 11th try at the weekend. They're scoring a lot of tries, and Peebles probably up front as well have a forward pack that can pose a lot of problems for a team like Aberdeen. Peebles are probably one of the teams in that division which are equipped well across the field, 1 to 15. Falkirk have got a really good back division. Last Wade have really good forwards, but there's weaknesses there. Peebles probably have a little bit more strength across the squad, so going to Ruby's Law, they should have a bit too much for Aberdeen, but I've just probably cursed it. Everyone I predict usually turns out the other way. So
I've noticed that, yes. Yeah, but of course, interestingly enough, Berwick, the next match, 2nd of March, which will be obviously 2 weeks before Aberdeen play Peebles, Berwick have a 9-point lead over them, so they only need a draw at home against Kirkcaldy, and it's out of Aberdeen's hands anyway. So that's going to be an interesting situation. But that replay between Lasswade and Falkirk has been confirmed for March the 30th. So if Peebles don't get that bonus point win, we could be getting our calculators out towards the end of the season at Hawthornden for a climax to the National 2 season, just like we had last season, of course, which was an amazing thing. No one could have written that.
Yeah, I just the frustration comes in terms of the fact that we're having to wait that long for the season to be finished. You just talked about the Premiership campaign, and yes, we've got the playoffs, but it's almost done. And the further you go down the leagues, the more games there are to play, and it's just absolutely ridiculous, really, in terms of the league structure. But it would have been great if those 2 games perhaps could have been played on the same date, because it would have given us a little bit more clarity. Because if win, lose or draw Peebles in that game, you're still having to wait a while for the next fixture. If Peebles win, the kind of appetite for that last week Falkirk game dwindles slightly because it's only one team that goes up. But yeah, the frustration probably more points towards the fixture congestion there.
Well, we must say congratulations to Darren Goodfellow on his 100th appearance for Berwick, and Jack Webster 300 appearances, so that's pretty special. So well done to both of them. The other scores in National 2 were Newton Stuart 24, Stirling County 12, and Aberdeen Grammar 29, Stuart's Melville 45. So a look at the table in National 2, and it's Peebles at the top, the 72, Falkirk 66, Newton Stuart docked 2 points incidentally, dropped to 60, Lasswade 58, Gordonians 45, Stuart's Melville 41, Kirkcaldy 31, Stirling County 26, Berwick 25, and Aberdeen Grammar with 16. And of course, Lasswade still have 3 games to play. They need a try bonus in each. That would take them to 73. And if Peebles get nothing, then up go Lasswade.
Yeah, it's great that there's still a lot of teams in the conversation, but I think Peebles Aberdeen game, Peebles know what job they need to do to secure promotion, and that game between Lasswade and Falkirk, you've got to say it's going to be a difficult task for Lasswade to get 5 points. It's going to be a difficult task for Falkirk to get 5 points, but it all balances on that game, Peebles Aberdeen. So that's the next big one on the radar, and then probably conversation about the rest after that. Back
to your predictions then. Of course, all season really, in the last sort of few weeks, you've been saying Falkirk to go up. Change now? You'd have probably said that going into injury time.
Well, with about 15 minutes to go, I didn't see a Peebles victory. And being honest, I think everything that I've predicted so far this season, I think Peebles, when I've covered them, they've played bad. When I've predicted they win, they usually play poorly as well. I did think that tie against Kirkcaldy and the home tie against Berwick were 2 more challenging fixtures for Peebles, and that was just purely down to history. The Kirkcaldy game almost proved that way. The Berwick one never. That was a one-sided game, and Peebles played really well in that fixture. But the Kirkcaldy one would. I thought Falkirk probably had the easier run of fixtures just because of their squad. But it doesn't matter a jot now. I just think that it comes down to that Aberdeen game, and people just know what they've got to do. So for the first time in my life, I'm probably just going to sit on the fence and keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, it's the best policy, I find.
Yeah, you're good at it.
Yes, indeed. International 3 then, all games played in that division. Champagne corks popping at Dumfries, where Preston Lodge received their trophy for winning the league title and capped it off with a 33-12 victory. Well done to them. Allen Glens 29, Boroughmuir 15, Cartha Queen's Park 20, Orkney 46, Hamilton 3, Hillhead Jordan Hill 33, and Howe 5 59, West of Scotland 41. A 100-point game in those horrible conditions. So many congratulations to Get 100 points in that game, but I have to say it's not looking particularly great for Hamilton, who have yet to win a game in that division. They've got 10 points. They're 6 points adrift from Cartha Queen's Park, but they do have 3 games left, and they certainly need to come back into that early form that they had early in the season, where they picked up 4 losing bonus points and 6 try bonuses. They haven't added to that for quite some time. In National 4, Garnock unbeaten again, an impressive 57-0 demolition of Dunfermline. Not even bullets will stop them from getting promotion. Greenock Wanderers 32, Ross High 21, North Berwick 35, Perthshire 14 and Stuart 50, Murrayfield 19. Look at the table then. Garnock at the top of the table, played 15, won 15, 14 try bonuses, a points difference of 591, 74 points at the top. I think they just need a couple to confirm their promotion into National 3. White Craigs 56, Strathmore 51, Stuart 51, North Berwick 47, Dunfermline 39, Greenock Wanderers 39, Perthshire 23, Murrayfield Wanderers 22 and Ross High at the bottom with 11 points. So a couple of weeks before we see some more league rugby, because obviously the Calcutta Cup happening on Saturday, but on Friday night there's one Board League match, and that is going to be between Selkirk and Melrose, one that we'll be covering, so join us at 7 o'clock on Rugby Radio for that at rugbyradio.co.uk. But let's get on to what should be a very interesting discussion on the future of club rugby in Scotland after Super Series has been axed. And let's face it, everyone has an opinion on this. Nobody has a solution that is universally acceptable, judging by the comments and thumbs up and thumbs down to suggestions. A working party is going to be assembled to come to a decision, which is a bit of a thankless task, and I think they have to come to a decision by March the 13th. So a big debate, and the main question is, do we let Super 6 teams back into the club ranks again? Dale, kick us off with that.
In short, I would say no. I think my view on it is that they were a new part of some club's history, and it's not really worked. And I think to try and travel with that tarnished kind of venture that they had, like there's so many positives from it. Like I'm a fan of the product. Like I like the rugby. But these clubs have sprung out as franchises, so there's not a lot of history that goes along with Stirling Wolves and Southern Knights, and Boroughmuir Bears. They're new clubs, they're new teams that have established. Now all the clubs at the start knew what they had to do. They had to put a big business proposal in and identify how they're going to be able to sustain a semi-pro team and a club team. So in my opinion, I think that those clubs, there has to be a way forward in terms of how they're merged back into the existing club. Now, I've said it at the weekend, like there's not a lot of players from that Southern Knights team that would go back into a Melrose club. We're in different eras now, where a lot of those players might be going to look to play in the Premiership, because there's less attachment to your local club, because if you want to play quality rugby, sometimes that club in your area or the club you're attached to can't provide that. So players will find their way into an environment to play. Scottish Rugby's job is to find out that pathway for the quality players to get exposure, to get game time, to play. But like some Melrose, they'll have finances to be able to emerge from National 1 in a few years' time and preserve that history that they've created for hundreds of years, or over 100 years. And then you've got other clubs as well that didn't establish themselves as well. So Boroughmuir, for example, and Stirling, they've not been able to find a balance. So why should they catapult back up to the top of Scottish rugby? Because they might not be able to sustain that, because the players might not want to go and play for them. So allow them the opportunity and support them to try and build the foundations again.
Right, Neil Hinnigan, you have a vested interest, obviously, as Director of Rugby of Kelso, so I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm looking for 2 points of view. The Kelso point of view, which obviously, I mean, every club among the 50 in the league are going to be what's best for their club, and that's not going to suit everyone. So we know that. So from a Kelso perspective, what are you looking to see to happen? And then from a personal point of view, with an overview of the whole thing.
Well, from Kelso's point of view, it's a very short turnaround in some circumstances, depending on the way it goes. So one of the things that's muted is that there would be the 6 clubs and then the top 4 from this year's Premiership,
which would include Kelso.
So in many ways, you could say we've got the golden ticket along with the other 3 that are in the top 4 due to the fact that you could land up either side of this, depending on where it goes. The problem with it for Kelso, if it goes that way, is how do we compete against these clubs from the off, depending on how strong they are. Now, some of them, you look at Ayrshire Bulls, who would be Ayr, again, if that's the case, and they will be anyways, because they're in the Premiership. They are a hugely, hugely ambitious club, and they pride themselves on winning everything they go into. And, they are now, for me, the front runners to win the Premiership, no matter what happens from here. So from that point of view, the more teams that are like Ayr, which there could be others, depending on how this goes, it's a big ask for the likes of Kelso to compete week in, week out. Now, would we finish bottom in that? I'd like to think we could probably stay above the bottom place, but it would be hard. So from Kelso's point of view, realistically, it's not impossible. We could compete in that league, but we'd have a hell of a lot of work to do in a very short space of time. My life would be hell, for example, for 3 or 4 months until we, build it up as quick as we can, and to do it in that time scale would probably be a big ask, or maybe a bit much. But it depends on how the standard would start off. I do believe some of the other Super 6 clubs obviously would come down the standard a fair bit. So that's one thing from Kelso's point of view that we would struggle with. The other things they're coming up with is, I believe, this is just from hearsay and things that are written, is that it stays as is and no one goes anywhere, and the league stays as they are, and each club individually has to fight their way back to wherever they may get to from the Super 6 clubs. If that was the case, Kelso are probably in a really strong position for obvious reasons. However, then Ayr and Heriots are going to be massively advantaged on everyone else in the Premiership. So that's just a point to make, but it would leave us with plenty of manoeuvring room to be in that mid-table next year or wherever. So Kelso are sitting in a pretty fortunate position, because if we weren't good enough to be in that new league with the 6 in it, we would naturally find our place. As long as we are organised, doing things right, and sticking to our principles, even if we have to come down out of there again, we would be still strong and play at the level we're supposed to. So from the 2 point of views that I could see sort of coming on the horizon, Kelso are quite fortunate, Stuart, and the other option would be to have a 14-team league where, again, 3 teams would be potentially go down, 1 up. That was be muted as well. Again, we could probably do enough in there to stay where we are. But again, depending on Kelso as a club, because there's obviously a committee, it's not just myself, and then there's everyone else that's involved in it. We're not an established top 4 club at this point. Well, we have to be honest about that. But we have many potential outlets to look at, and I think we've got the potential to do it. It's just whether we want to take on that workload and whether we then can obviously make it happen. But from Kelso's point of view, I think that we're not panicking because we are in a fortunate position. Let's look at it from someone else's point of view. If we were 6th in the league, or 7th, or 8th, or say Selkirk, or Glasgow Hawks, I'd be worried, because you could end up, through no fault of your own, being relegated, which no one liked. And you're getting forced to be relegated into a new structure. So you would have dropped down a league, and then obviously every other club's in the same boat. Everybody moves down, and it's chaos. Let's be honest. That's the way I see it. And they might go down that route, and then everyone feels aggrieved. So from their point of view, overall, I would say that many clubs in the Premier, or the clubs at the bottom of the Premiership that are looking at this, they'll be worried that the top 4 go with the 6, because then they become the new National 1 or a new Premiership, and there's a new name for the top league and so on. So naturally they would be relegated from the top flight. So at the moment they're playing the top flight. So there's quite a lot for these clubs at stake. I think if you're further down the leagues, the only thing you're really concerned about if you're in that 3 or something like that is if Boroughmuir's in your league, and then they maybe were to keep 6, 7 of their Super 6 players, you would think they would, comfortably win National 3. So anyone in that league's maybe praying that they go up, that they take them away. So the problem is, up and down the scale, everybody's got a different agenda or a different worry. So overall, it's a mess really, and to clear it up, someone is going to be upset.
Yeah, I just think it's an easy fix. I just don't get where there's the idea to squeeze them in anywhere. I just like a lot of the players, they've got big squads, and when you look down the squad list, thinking about whatever Scottish Rugby do to plug that gap with Edinburgh A and Glasgow A, there has to be a place for those quality players to go and play. But we don't have the amount of quality players. Like, we had a lot of players influxed into the Southern Knights that weren't originally from Borders clubs, for example, but some of them will go back to Jed. There wasn't too many, like Grant Shields went back to Kelso already. Some of these the Hoyt players went back. So when Neil even says that Kelso aren't an established top 4 club, they weren't years ago either. And neither were Hoyt, neither were Mar. Curry were there or thereabouts, but it gave an opportunity for some other clubs to get in there and set the standard. Now, Ayr, if they do go on, if they're able to amalgamate the two teams and go on in a great run, that'll just drive the standards up for everybody else. Melrose know what position they're in. Burham, what position they're in. And it might be 1 year of pain getting out of National 3 to get into National 2, but they might not be able to attract all those club players that are connected to that back to the club. It's going to take a big change in culture. It's going to take a bit of probably finances as well to try and make it work. I just don't. I would, and it takes a lot for me to lose a little bit of faith in something in terms of I buy into playoffs, I buy into Super Series. Like, I'm a fan of Scottish Club Rugby. I would lose a bit of faith in it if this restructure brought those 6 clubs back in at the expense of everybody else. I just think it's completely unethical and unfair.
Now, there'll be 50% roughly people supporting you at the moment, what you're saying. There'll equally be 50% saying, no, that's not the way I see it. There is going to be fallout. There's going to be fallout that the SRU has to deal with, other clubs as well. How are we going to kind of get this all working together and the harmony brought back in? Because to me, that's a complete uphill struggle without trying to sound negative.
I don't know how, but for me it's quite simple and transparent. And they said there was conversation about trying not to upset as many clubs as possible. So you either piss off 50 or you annoy 6 and get rid of 6. And I think for me it's an easy balancing act. It's a simple solution, is that a project that started didn't work, and it's Scottish Rugby's responsibility to try and merge that back into club rugby and find that gap again and plug that gap. It's not at the detriment of some of these clubs that are ambitious and growing and putting a lot of finances in and volunteers. And I was speaking to somebody, I had friends over on Sunday. As soon as they walk through the door, they're talking about Super Series and what's going to happen. And the thing is talking about all these clubs that would potentially be relegated. And it's a culture thing in terms of the mindset of the players. Some of the older players, and this was straight from another player at a different club, and saying that, what about, the players that have went to the well one more time, saying one last push to get promoted. They get promoted and then all of a sudden they go, nah, you're not going up. You're going to have to stay in that league for another year. It's demoralising, and in the young players that are perhaps going to follow that club up through the ranks and go, I'm not playing another year in National 3, 2 or 1, I want to go to the Premiership, so off I trot, and then those clubs fold. Like, you'll never know what could have been of those clubs, and you could get a lot of growth from those club teams that are ambitious at the moment.
Well, let's have a look at some of those suggestions that have been put forward. We've all seen them in print. There's the 14-team league for Premiership, with all the Super 6 clubs joining the top 9 of the 10 clubs in the Premiership, less relegated Jed Forest and the club teams from Ayr and Heriots. We've got the Super 6 with Knights changing back to being called Melrose, joining the top 4 in the Premiership. Disband the Super 6 completely is another suggestion. Let the players play for whatever club gives them the best deal in the Premiership. And that itself brings in another question about payment for players. And you suggested it a few weeks ago, Neil, when we were kind of talking about this. And it could be one big auction.
Well, yeah, it could be, more so in Edinburgh, because there's 3 clubs. There's 3 Super 6 franchise to divide between, realistically 3 or 4 clubs that are, vying for that position to have these club players. That's where probably Heriots are in the strongest position, because they are a Super 6 franchise and a club that's probably run the right way. So they will be able to keep some of the guys they've had over the years. I believe they will become fairly strong. However, the likes of Curry will be licking their lips at the availability of some of the Watsonians guys, the Burham players, the odd guy for the Heriots that's maybe not integrated there. Southern Knights, there's some Edinburgh guys down there, so
Are we still going to see a Southern Knights, do you think, or is it going to revert to Melrose?
It has to be Melrose. I mean, that's what I was talking about before. They legally can't be Southern Knights to play in the. I mean, that just wouldn't happen. It's Melrose, but that's where it's a sticky point. You know, they've been saying they're representing the Borders for however many years now to make this work, but now they're Melrose. So it's been a grey area for a long time, Stuart.
Yeah.
One I could never understand.
Yeah, because Melrose won the franchise and chose Southern Knights as the name.
Yep.
And I know Alan Tate and others have really tried to get into the community. They've tried to get the buy-in from clubs. But ultimately, there's still this mindset that, it's a Melrose club, which of course it is. But they wanted it to be a Borders club.
Well, I mean, they went for the franchise themselves to win it as Melrose. At the time, there was a lot of chat of the south of Scotland doing it, or the south at the time, and they didn't want to be part of that. I mean, their players didn't play for the south of Scotland around then as well, because that was probably part of it. So they won it as Melrose and then opted to change to the Southern Knights to be something similar and whatever. And it was like closing the door, closing the stable door once the horse had bolted. It was... and people just didn't take to it, and there were so many fundamentals they got wrong. So did the SRU as well, but in this area, it's very fickle. I don't want to kick them when they're down, because I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't have the answers for how you pull this community, this border region together. I mean, for years we've had politics, in-house fighting, all the rest of it. Border league situations, it's continually a mess, Stu. So let's not just pop it at Melrose. We're all responsible across the board, and it's just not worked for many reasons. And for me, they're now going to revert back to Melrose to probably try and gain that place in the league, which is why I would presume they would go back to being Melrose.
Well, Dale, another question, of course, is the amount of money invested in Super 6, which was pretty substantial, let's be honest. Where's that money going to go now? Is it going to be invested in the club game right the way through the divisions, or how do you see that happening?
You've asked me that without even compiling a spreadsheet, Stuart. You've got us on the huff there. I think that ultimately the answer lies with Scottish Rugby, because there's a gap there now. We don't know, because we don't know what the outcome is going to be. And even I think the deadline of the 13th of March, or whatever you said, it's quite a quick deadline to come back to a solution for such an important thing. Because they get it wrong, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board again. There's a lot of things that could do a lot of damage in the long run. But the money's going to have to be channelled elsewhere. Ultimately, the goal is to protect and look after the national team and then the professional teams. So there's a gap there in terms of trying to nurture that pathway and players through. Now, they might have to have some bright idea elsewhere in terms of investing in another team that's already established, perhaps. Put some real backing into some sort of quality A division, because the idea of friendlies and stuff just doesn't make me want to go and watch it and invest in it. The Super Series, I enjoyed watching it, but you're involved in it. So I did enjoy that aspect of it, but the money's going to have to be channelled somewhere to make sure that pathway's plugged, because we're talking about galvanising and protecting the club game. We've not talked about the professional and the national game, but the gap is there, and that's where the money needs to be channelled. But some of the money, whatever's channelled in there, does need to filter down to the club game to make sure that the combining of these clubs in whatever way, shape or form that the league structures, some of the money is going to have to go to those clubs to make sure that they've got a bit of support. Because, like, in my opinion, and I'm just always going to use Melrose as the example, I would disband the Southern Knights, because they had the blueprint for so many years. Like, when I first started covering them, you watched them and you watched what they do, and you had so much respect for them, because there was an arrogance about them, because they knew they were that good. Their club was the blueprint for any club that wanted to be successful, minus the Sevens, had to look at Melrose. The conveyor belt of players they had in the Scotland club game. Now, for me, the best option for that is to go, we know where we are now, let's build back up and have a project, because if there's one club in Scottish Rugby that could do it, it'd be a club like Melrose. But the money has to probably go to them to support them to do that, and that might be for giving them some good coaches, and bring some good coaches and bring those young players through and get that appetite back. But the money's going to have to be invested into those clubs to support them, but also plug that gap. And You come up with a figure for what that is, because I don't have a clue.
Now, Neil, you're nodding your head there.
Yeah. I've got to say that sounds like I was giving it tight to Melrose before, but in what Dale's saying is correct for me. Melrose were the outstanding outfit in the area. They are actually missed here regarding producing talent. Now, they maybe didn't originally produce, it'll be a youngster for Hoyk or Kelso or Jed, wherever. Now, people don't like that when it was happening. They would go to Melrose, but you have to give Melrose their due. At that time, regarding sevens and having the money and everything was one thing, and call it luck, call it fate, call it, always been, whatever. But one thing they did with it was they made haste of it. They made a lot of good with it. The amount of under-20s that came through there, the coaching that happened over at Melrose, and as you say, they had an arrogance to that, but they were very, very good. And there's an individual in particular, Mike Dalgetty was there at the time, and the guy was a winner, and that's what they're badly missing. They had a guy, they had a spearhead there that really wanted to win and make the most of everything, and he was selfish for Melrose. And sometimes that's what you've got to have, Stu. You've got to be ruthless at times as well. And Melrose are just totally lacking that direction at the moment for me. And they are still a massive, massive club in Scottish rugby. And in this area, we are just lacking that at the moment as someone that could do that.
And I totally agree. The things there that you're talking about, the players that are coming through, it must have worked at some time, because the current Scottish captains, when you're looking back at Rory Darge, they talk about North Berwick and his education, but he came to Melrose and earned his stripes and played in Scottish Cup finals and fought for the Premiership. Finn Russell as well. He went and played for Falkirk and then back through, and then it was at Ayr. He ended up getting his, plaudits, playing at the top of Scottish Club Rugby. Now, that's where they were born. That's where they emerged from. Now, it must work in some way, shape or form. So does the club game work? Put the money back into it. Does that work in the Premiership? It might do.
One thing that Dale's saying, and is completely correct, is once you get to 18 years old, or maybe 17, 19, 20, Melrose was the vehicle around here to go to the next level. And I think that's why I think they thought Southern Knights would be that again, but it just didn't get that buy-in, and I think they just got away off path of it. But again, it is missed in this area, and we're looking for another club or another way to get the players through. So this is all part of this for me.
Because the Super Series teams all had the same blueprint. They all had it was designed to give young players an opportunity to play top level rugby. Now Melrose already were providing that, and so were Ayr. And Ayr, they all had the experience in there as well. Like, say, you think of times when young players from the club I was at the time, and Scott McCormick, Callum Anderson went to Melrose, represented Scotland Club and got opportunities with Scotland Sevens, but they were in that environment with the likes of John Dale and Graham Dodds. So they had the balance, but then the Super Series clubs, they never took the blueprint, but the incentive and the direction of that was somehow not too far away in terms of provide these young players with the environment and the exposure to prepare them for professional rugby. It was never to prepare them to go back into club rugby or anything else. It was to prepare them to go into that avenue.
Now, in the old days, we had district rugby, of course, and it was very high profile, wasn't it? We had the 4 districts. We also had the Anglo-Scots coming in, Exiles, and a few other as well. But where do you see the district rugby set up moving forward?
Yeah, I think it could have a massive part to play. I mean, obviously it's off the ground again now. Before it was off the ground, I would have said, well, is it the right answer? Who knows? But now that it's here again, then I think it's got to be explored a bit further regarding what it could do for Scottish rugby again. And, normally going back to things doesn't always work, but it was a big model before my time, obviously, but it worked very well in the amateur days. And, the stories that all the players that played then speak about would suggest that anything close to that again, or, even half of what that was, would probably bear fruit for Scottish rugby. Now, if you were to have a Premiership built up again, and again it'll be survival of the fittest if they did it that way and said, right, who's going to get their club there? Ayr are probably going to be bang there at the start. Dale mentioned it, they'll set the standard, who can follow on. If you were to get 7, 8 clubs that were up to that level, that Ayr probably will be, which is somewhere between Super 6 and the Premiership, imagine a district competition with that standard of player. once you get to that point, if there was enough clubs around your area, and then there will be enough good players still playing maybe the next step down, you could find that would be a pretty high standard. At the moment, do I think it's a high standard in a district? It's high enough, but I mean the Ayrshire Bulls and they still have a bit much for some of the inter-district teams, and that's my opinion. I still think they're a higher grade, and people will say, you're not talking rubbish now, but I know how much the physical side and the organisation and all that comes into it, and I think if we can get that district a bit higher again, is that an avenue to go down? Do we look at that?
Because one of the exciting things for Super 6 when it was first announced was the cross-border competition, the fact that you're going to play Welsh clubs and Irish clubs and maybe English clubs as well. And I know there was great excitement during the British and Irish Cup days, wasn't there, when Melrose were taking part in Ayr and they were picking up wins against the Doncasters and clubs like that. And even Gala went down to play Bristol, I think, got a bit of a humping. But, the experience that these guys got from playing outside of Scotland, and you have to go outside the area to test yourselves. It's a bit like, and I remember Rob Muffet said this a lot, the Borders schools, for instance, were playing among themselves, but they needed to get out to play Dollar and Merchiston, all these, to get a different perspective on the game. And I think, obviously not having that, and obviously COVID didn't help either, but the players were very much promised cross-border competition. It never happened, but it's something which I think everyone is desperate to get back on the table again.
Yeah, I was at Heritage when it first started, and we were supposed to play Merthyr, Cardiff, and I think it was Aberavon, and the buzz that we had about, we were preparing for it and how we were going to logistics, and there was a lot on myself with the managing side of it, and then there was the players of it. I think that was where they were pretty unlucky with Super Series. If that had happened, who knows? I don't know. But it would have helped, and it would have gave the players experience, and it was a lot harder playing away in Wales rather than just go to Stirling or going up to Ayr or whatever. And I would say with inter-districts, I had a look at it a while ago when I was in with the South, with the Sevens and things, and myself and Harky, we had a serious look at trying to build a game where we could play a team, an emerging nation like Belgium, for example. If we could play them home and away, it was about funding it and fixed, how we would do that. We even had a cost worked out and everything, and we felt like we could have done something with that idea, and that would be miles down the line at the moment. But let's just say we were building it. That would be something that would maybe be an avenue for our players to play at the right level for them, and where it would really challenge them to be playing. Maybe because these emerging nations are always looking for fixtures. I know Croatia were over playing Sheffield, one of the Sheffield teams this year, for example, and we had a lad for Croatia that played for them, and he was keen for Kelso to play them, a Premiership side in Scotland. So you're looking at these sides, if they could challenge in that sort of arena, and maybe each district had a home and away against a Cambridge Uni or a Newcastle A or whatever, and then play your championship, you would then be able to expand it without huge costs, because at the end of the day, money is a big factor. But this is where we're probably missing the trick, and I think a lot of youngsters now don't get the experience of going out their comfort zone.
Yeah. Getting
on a bus, travelling 5 hours, getting in a hotel, getting up into the car park, we pass them out with the ball, speaking, building the tactics, into a room with a whiteboard, coaches giving it everything, and then having to challenge themselves in an environment that they're not used to. You do that 2 or 3 times, you are ready for bigger and better things, and it's obvious. So for me, I just feel like we're missing, in this country, we're not really challenging. As you say, we're staying in the Goldfish Bowl a bit much, and certainly in our region as well, we do it a lot. I find it great when we play pre-season games against Alnwick and Tynedale and Percy Park. We've been playing against here. They aren't a high standard, Percy Park, for example, but the different environment and the different ways of playing, it's helping us. We find we get a bit of refreshment from it. So I think there's loads of room to grow inter-district and whatever going forward. But as I say, it takes a lot of volunteers, all this, Stuart, and you need the right people, and you need the SRU to buy into it, and I think that's where we're really struggling. The clubs didn't want to buy it at Super 6, SRU didn't want to buy into inter-district. So where's the common ground?
You look at the appetite though in inter-district when the squads have been announced this week, and in one season, the improvement in quality. Like the South led the way last year. Obviously the defeat against Cali in the final, but their squad is not too far away from what it was last year. They've kept the quality, but every other side has went, do you know, let's take this seriously, and they've got a real. Every squad looks really, really strong.
Yeah, it's a good look about it, isn't it?
Definitely, and we're probably at a really dangerous crossroads as well now in terms of the what's all going on. There's a lot going on in terms of change at the moment, and I hope it's not at the detriment of the inter-district, because I just feel that's in an early rebirth, which is going to be really successful over the next few years.
Well, the bottom line in all this is, we want club rugby to raise the standards high enough to bridge that gap between club rugby and professional rugby.
What we need to offer players in this country is an opportunity to play at the right level and sustain our clubs, because our clubs are the thing that's going to sustain the game. All those volunteers that Neil's on about, those community clubs which provide it provides rugby, but it provides a whole host of other things. Players that are successful and players that are good will find the right level. If you're destined to be an international player, you're going to find the right avenue if you've got the right support round about you. And it's just Scottish Rugby laying on that right avenue, those right pathways for players. But you look at, I said it right at the start, I've been able to watch Kelso for the last 10 years and they've perhaps not got it right, but I do think the work like Neil has done at Kelso has allowed those players to create that culture to go up to a different level in their league. So you look at the club in isolation, it's pretty much the same club that it was last year, and it's fighting for the top 4 position. So get the pathways right, get the opportunities right, and the cream will rise to the top.
This is probably an opportunity to say something that it's not going to be popular, but I don't really care. I think what we get this at Kelso all the time, fed from the SRU, blueprint, this is what you do, blueprint. I've said it numerous times to SRU officials, and they look at me like I've got two heads. I'm like, if this blueprint's wrong, we're all wrong. Would it not be better to be really, really building it that each club is so different? Because Kelso's a vastly different club to Ayr or Highland or Watsonians. There's a massive difference in how your makeup is done and how you function as a club. So you've got to find the ways in your own town, in your own club, or if you're in the middle of the city, to work that process to make it good for you. And yes, it's hard because you need the right people in a small area to make that work. But once you get that working, and then I think blueprints start coming to higher up and find that you start to get the goods from everywhere around the country. And that's why probably inter-district is better, because you can do that from that base. But I just find it so much of it is put on pressure onto clubs to do this, do that, to get participation money. I mean, there's a whole host of things we're no speaking about here that involves this for youth rugby in the private schools and such like that are feeding Scottish rugby at the moment is good, and it always has been. I just think that they don't make the most of what is actually in this country regarding the state schools and everyone else. They need to start where it probably looks like, oh my, we can't spend the money there. It's that's probably where they should be spending it, and that's where they'll find that they can get a lot more out of what's here already. This having 50% of your national team from elsewhere, let's be honest, and I'm not against it, because guys like Duhan van der Merwe are brilliant for our team, and I fully hardly believe he's as much Scottish as anyone else regarding his faith and what he's doing for the jersey, and he's massive. He's an example for us, so you don't want to take that away. You don't want to take opportunities away from people who are coming over to play professional rugby in this country, who are eligible to play for us. We should use them completely. However, if we can get that 50%, maybe up to 70 or 80 of our own people, players that are developed from the very start through the club game or the schools and right up, I think we will be closer to the likes of Ireland then than we are now, because we don't have this clear pathway. That whole thing needs reviewed, and then we can look at the steps that it needs to take. But I would think that if they looked at spending money in places that they're not, that they would completely go, oh well, no, budgets are tight and everything. I think a lot of the stuff at the top could take care of itself at certain times, and the stuff at the bottom that probably seems insignificant really much is significant to them, I think. I think England had that problem as well for a while, and they changed it. They're maybe not competing quite as high as they'd like as an international team, but you look at the sheer numbers of players. I know they've got a bigger population, completely right, but you look at the number of players who come through their school systems, and they now have a lot of backing and spend money at state schools, so they align them to all the other professional clubs. So some of the state schools in this area should be aligned a lot more heavily to Edinburgh, or if you're at Norfolk, Glasgow or whatever. And I just feel quite passionate about all that. I just think there's loads out there that they just, and getting your point across is difficult as well, and you're one voice and many others. But as I say, Kelso, lately we done what we felt was right for our club, and I think you need to, our youth system has to work for Kelso to stay. Let's just say the Prem 1 was to stay roughly where it is, maybe hopefully get a little bit better standard wise for Scottish Rugby over the next 10 years. Kelso need to have their youth system to provide for Kelso. Scottish Rugby Union has to have their club sides, schools to provide for Scotland. I don't see how difficult that really is to understand. It's got to be that way. So the grassroots is the biggest place to start. I sometimes, there's not a lot of longevity in how much more can we go around the world picking up players from a second choice 10 at Auckland Blues or whatever to come here. That's got to change quickly.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of subjects there, and this is all speculation, of course, because we don't know what's going to happen until probably March 13th and a bit longer after that. We'll all have to come back again once we know what's going on, and then just decide if this is the right path or the wrong path, and everyone will have an opinion. But that's it for this week. We have a Friday night Border League special with commentary on Selkirk versus Melrose on Friday night at 7 o'clock. Robin Purdy and Ian Hurd, our commentary team on that one. We'll be back with another podcast next Thursday, and of course it's a big build-up to the semi-final playoffs on March the 2nd, when the show will come live from Mansfield Park for Hawick against Kelso. My thanks to Dale Clancy and of course to Neil Hinnigan, but that's it for today.